My name is Kelsey Andrews, and I'm here to read a few poems from my book, Big Sky Falling, for the Greater Victoria Public Library. And I'd like to really thank the GVPL for inviting me to do this. First off, I want to acknowledge that I live and am speaking on the traditional lands of the Husainich people. The nearest village to me is the Tsayout. I'd like to thank the Husainich people for their care of this land on which I am a visitor. The book, Big Sky Falling, is my first book and seems to me to have three main arcs. One follows my move from Grand Prairie, Alberta, I was a country kid, to Vancouver, where I was a city kid. And this was at about 19. And I had to learn to love the coast while missing the other place. And also find nature in an urban setting. Also, I was diagnosed at 13 with depression, and poetry became a way to talk about it, to talk about how I was feeling, and also to talk to myself. So the depressed part of me would talk to the undepressed part of me, and then the undepressed part of me would write a poem back to the depressed part of me, which sounds a little weird, but it worked. And some of those poems are in the book. And then the third thing, I use poetry to help me notice and praise the natural world, especially the little things. I'm really a fan of the little bits. So the first poem I want to read is about poetry itself. It's After the Guest House by Rumi, and it's called Poetry's House. There are a lot of plants, and their roots snake under the baseboards. You can hear water trickling down the stairs. The thermostat's set high, which makes you uncomfortable in your clothes. It smells of black mud and a little rill wandering through leaf mold, of metal and burnt things and ice. Poetry's house smells of the human body left unwashed for months, that smell that is the taste of people before we were tamed. The second poem is After the Forgotten Dialect of the Heart by Jack Gilbert, and it's called City Girl Marries the Wrong Farmer and Laments. Sadness is seduction by moths, butterfly kisses that leave tiny wing prints of ash in the sweat of my palms. Loneliness is ambergris and gasoline on my skin. Anger has the weight of all the soil in our fields and the lime you sowed and the irrigation pipes we laid in silence like flagellation. This is what my body wants to say to your body. Vacancy. There is space in me where you are not. And one of the things about being in the country is you get to ride horses. So this is riding lessons. The smell. Sweat, dust, and leather, and the day is so hot. The movement of your spine to yield to the horse, but still keep your back straight. Keep your heels down. One hand for reins leaves you one to play with the mane. The hair is thicker than a human's. The knowledge, each time you squeeze a leg or pull a rein, that he is stronger than you, that he does as you ask only out of training and good nature. A skittish horse, like a rocket in a jar, the power trembling under you, the flesh alive with tension beneath the hide. You've been told that if he spooks, you should yank his head around, because a horse follows his head, and you would turn him in smaller and smaller circles until he had to stop. This one is called Grain Shed, After the Game by Lorna Crosier. She is running away again. She is going to live in a grain shed. When she was younger and saw them on the edges of fields, as from the back seat of the car, she thought they were settlers' cottages and imagined those settlers' one-roomed, unwindowed, tiny gray lives. Now she knows what they are. She still likes to imagine living in one. She doesn't have a sleeping bag or granola bars as she had planned. Still, she is running away. It is raining big, angry drops, and suddenly, beside her, the ditch is full of frogs. She kneels to catch one, feels it breathing against her fingers, feet pushing at the meaty part of her palm. I stand in the ditch, white nightdress swirling in the current. This is what we take, I tell her. When she runs for good years later, frogs the color of shaded leaves will haunt her hands. So that's a poem about before I left, and this is a poem about after, and one of those small things I was talking about noticing. It's after Little Pretty Things by Stephen Dunn. Lacewing. I met a lacewing once. I didn't know she sucked the sweetness from aphids, ate the eggs. I just knew her wings were like an answer to a question Beauty asked, and the stripe of green along her length. Traveler in the wrong place, knocking against the Skytrain window, bewildered by glass and the acrid smell of aftershave. Stick with me, I told her. I'll take you somewhere you make sense. She climbed my thumb, appendages sticking in the thin layer of sweat. I held still for her, communed, and the other commuters laughed when I set her on a blackberry cane outside the station, said goodbye aloud. And this poem is also about bugs, but slightly less happy. It's called Diana and the Stag. In summer, when the houseflies breed to unbearable numbers, she becomes a huntress, stalking their buzzing, shelled bodies across the window with folded newspaper, teeth bared. The more that die, the hungrier she becomes. She is bathed in thin black fly blood, like tea left forgotten in the pot and gone feral, bitter. She kills for silence, to become, in this room, the only living thing. This next poem is called Terrain, and it has an epigraph from Leonard Cohen. This is to inform you that I've already turned to clay, from the Cuckold Song. Being a human didn't work out. I lie in my bed under sheets green as deep water, and I let myself flake away. Skin becomes sediment at the foot of the bed, and I turn like mountains folding. I sleep with the tenacity of rock. Finally, my bones are still as fossils, and the flesh is loam between my breasts. And this next poem is neither about Grand Prairie nor Vancouver. My mom and my aunt and I used to go to this place in Naramata, which is near Penticton, right by the lake. And this poem is about there. Naramata Dock. I like it better in the off-season. In summer, this perch is flocked by noisy, joyful birds. I am more timid wildlife, I must demur. But in April, I have the dock, the beach, the whole lake to myself. Shifting scales of mouse fur gray, dirty penny green, asphalt blue repel all invaders with cold left over from midwinter. See here, where there's a shadow, a sandy desert, undulating dunes shaped by a strange underwater wind. If we wait, small finned camels will climb that ridge there, and a girl, whiskered like a catfish, a tiny minnow maid, will wander past. What will she think if she looks up and sees me, wisps of hair moving in a strange invisible force against the current? So we're back to Vancouver with this poem, and I had not yet discovered how to love the new place. This is a homesick poem. It's called City Moon. The moon looks on, her battered face so still that men have mapped and named her bruises. I am glad to have her with me, but I have lost her as a witness. Although she looks, she cannot see me huddled beneath the glistening fist of all these lights. And this one is one of those depression poems. You can tell by the title, which is Doctors Call It Depression, but that is not his name. He is waking up again. I hear his fretful mutterings as he begins to stir. If I knew the right lullaby, perhaps I could sing him back to sleep. But he doesn't seem to know the songs I know, and he comes out to play. He sprints from palm to fingertips, and my hands ache with numbness. They lie in my lap like stunned fish, and will not take up a pen. Somehow he talks little Hope from next door into playing hide and seek. She hides so well that I can never find her. Food is ash in my mouth, gravel in my gut. Suddenly my breast is empty, and my arms will not rise. What do I call this pain? Perhaps if I knew the full name, I could call him home as mothers do at dinner time. Perhaps he would eat and be satisfied. Then I could lead him, holding his hand as he took the giant steps from rib to rib up to the little bed, built especially for him in my heart. This next one is called Bezoar. The silence inside the seed, inside the red fruit that is your heart. The part that hurts when you hold your breath because you are tired of all that breathing. The part they cannot kill with their pills and hospitals, and you cannot kill with your illness and lies, and death cannot kill when you try it on like a shirt you've been given for Christmas. When hope is lost and light, and when reason is gone, when thought and blood have run out, when the meat has been eaten by scavengers and the strings made from the sinews have unraveled, when the spoils have been divided and you are nothing left to fight over. It is the tiny silence in the middle that need not be defended because it cannot be assailed. Gristle. Bless the gristle, the pop in the mouth, the cherry etiquette of spitting. Not meat or bone, but even you, with your hunger and knives, there are some parts of the dead you can't have. Praise the ornery parts that find peace buried in landfills. And this next one is one of the poems about the undepressed me, talking to depressed me, trying to say, hey, it's going to be okay. It's going to get better. It's called She Hadn't Felt This Way in a Long Time. The world had been gray, the future long and plodding. Some days getting out of bed was a major excursion, requiring forethought, planning, periodic rest stops between the bedroom and the easy chair in front of the TV. Mornings she had to rest for an hour, recover from the dreams, before scaling the bedroom floor. Scaling is what it was. Everything. The path between the front door and the newspapers collecting like a family of storks in the box. Her morning cereal, which turned slowly into morning tea. The very hours themselves were on an increasingly steep incline. And then one day, things were flat again. Chocolate tasted like chocolate instead of oatmeal. Instead of sitting in her chair and thinking, if I were a good person, I'd mop or something, and watching the dust bunnies roll by, she'd get up and go for a walk. Almost before she had time to hate herself for not doing the dishes, they were clean. One day she was sitting in her chair and she got caught, like a fish on a line, by the lipstick plant on the table with the lamp, unable to look away from those flowers, thinking they are so pink, so pink. She was grateful for silly things. Colors and chocolate, but also the crow outside the window that had a call like a squeaky toy. The smell of laundry hanging to dry on her shower rod. Orange peels. She found herself thinking, I could, instead of I should. It might, instead of it'll never. Maybe, instead of no. And now I'd like to read a salmon poem, because all coastal poets write a salmon poem. Salmon are so important. And this one is After Returning by Terence Young. It's called The Salmon Remember. The salmon remembers. The salmon remembers where he was spawned, but it smells odd now, a little like diesel, and there's that long tunnel to fight through under the freeway. He doesn't remember that part, though he was borne down it on his way to the sea, because his memories go back further than his life, and things are changing too fast to keep track of. Fish knowledge winds through past generations, becomes part of the pattern. Each year the knowing travels in a new fish, in many fish. It is the memory of the bodies, all those blooming sex and death bodies that have turned here and jumped there and fucked and rotted in this spot near the bank, right here, this place they've spelunked to, under the road, roaring like a great waterfall, dark as the Alaskan coast in December. Fish knowledge is like if your brain wasn't a brain, but instead you had a dance inside your skull, and most of the dancers were great-great-great-grandparents, and each step was made first by ghosts. And this is one of the later poems. It's interesting, a first book of poetry, because often it's a lot of years of poetry making. So this is one of the later poems. It's fun to see the difference for me. It also has an epigraph, and it goes, "How many teeth does the snail have? Tens of thousands upon the tongue." From Study Guide Toward Naturalization of the Mouth by Miriam Yvette Parhikar. It's called Snail. Snails are tongues pried loose from mouths and clothed in enamel. They mumble to the earth, leaving a trail of glistening words that cannot be enunciated. If we could hear them, what words would tongues loosened until truly free have to give? Quiet, they repeat, and green, green, green. Snails dream of mulch and moonlight. They say gentle to the ground. And this one is my last poem. I wanted another moon poem because I love moon poems, and also I had that city moon that was kind of a sad one. So this is a happy moon. Moon howl. Mess of light behind clouds, spill of luminescence meandering in the morning, move into my mouth, myrrh and musk and maudlin, and nest there. Your monthly making of yourself, your monthly making yourself less. My mollusk tongue warms to your cool fire. Thank you very much.